ever revealed your real self to?
The man I trusted most has done the unthinkable.
A Spy Among Friends. Available 8th of December. Stream free on ITVX.
Now, with all the stories making the headlines where you are this Thursday, it's the ITV News.
Good evening and welcome to UTV Live. The Secretary of State is warning he's considering introducing water charges in future to help put Northern Ireland's finances on a sustainable footing.
Chris Heaton-Harris has now set a budget for Stormont in the absence of an executive, but he has accused former ministers of failing to protect public finances by significantly overspending. Our political correspondent Vicky Hawthorne reports.
The lights are on, but the Secretary of State says all Stormont departments need to do their best to save energy in order to cut bills. The call is part of the budget Chris Heaton-Harris has now set for Stormont in the absence of an executive. He has firmly put the blame for the state of Northern Ireland's finances on the ministers who left office just 3 weeks ago. He says he will consider introducing water charges and increasing rates here in future to help pay for services.
The criticism comes from having a £660 million back hole. I mean, that didn't magic itself overnight. Decisions were not taken that allowed for that to happen. We need to live within our means, and investment also needs to be made in key public services. So that's where you need both revenue and the block grant to help with that.
The former Finance Minister doesn't accept the Secretary of State's view.
That's pure Tory policy. They make a mess of the economy, they make a mess of public services for 12 years, they create a significant hole in their own budgets, and they rely on ordinary people to fill that gap. They instead put the burden on ordinary working families, and again we are exposed to the full extent of that because the DUP prevent us from having an executive.
While the DUP blames Sinn Féin.
I think there is serious questions for the former finance minister to answer in relation to the budget. He started a budgetary process last October. There was buy-in from no other political party in terms of the proposals that he was bringing forward in draft budgets, etc.
The criticism of former ministers is also being viewed as hypocritical.
I think that's a bit rich coming from a Conservative Secretary of State, bearing in mind that the Conservative Party have just cost our country £30 billion through its budget in September.
The Department of Health is getting over £7 billion in this budget, £228 million more than last year. Education is receiving over £2.5 billion, £286 million more than last year. But despite that, the Secretary of State is warning that the Department of Education must make significant reductions in its spending to live within its budget.
It is sadly inevitable that the Secretary of State has to set a budget for Northern Ireland, but what it points to are twin financial and governance crises that are facing Northern Ireland at present. We should have local ministers in place who are taking these decisions with proper accountability.
While the Secretary of State is setting this year's Stormont budget, Chris Heaton-Harris will be very aware that his suggestion that he is prepared to consider introducing water charges in the future won't go down well in already hard-pressed households across Northern Ireland right now. He will be counting on that turning into pressure to get the politicians back here. Vicky Hawthorne, UTV Live, Stormont.
Our political editor, Tracy McGee, is with me in the studio. So the Northern Ireland Secretary has a budget, but he has not stopped short of criticising the local ministers for the overspends.
That's right. And to be fair, Paul, as is always the case with the budget, there's quite a bit of smoke and mirrors here around the figures. So let me just go through them with you. So Chris Heaton-Harris is criticising the ministers for a £660 million overspend, and that was the case at the end of October when they left office. But I understand that overspend has come down quite considerably. That's because civil servants after the ministers left did the thing that they couldn't do because there was no executive. They got together, they had a look at the budgets and they worked out where they were able to move money around. And they got the overspend down to £520 million. They have since now identified where they can cut back, not do any spending. They've got the figure down to £330 million. Now think about that, that's £200 million of public sector, public services spending being cut back. Why is that £330 million figure important? Because last week, if you remember, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, announced that Northern Ireland was going to get £660 million as part of the autumn statement, starting next year with 330 next year, 330 million the following year. And as I understand it, the Treasury has said that the civil servants can bring next year's money into this year's budget, which wipes out the overspend. That's the good news. The bad news is Northern Ireland will have to cope with £200 million of public services cuts right now, and they're going into next year in the red to the tune of £330 million.
In order to balance the books, the Secretary of State is saying water charges are an option.
Yes, and he's saying that you can't cut back and not look at how to raise money. But look, I have to say, this threat of water charges is straight out of the NIO playbook dating back to 2007. Think back, Peter Hain said he was going to cut MLA's wages, Chris Heaton-Harris has said he's going to do that, and water charges were also the big threat, and he's doing this again. Our politicians have heard it all before. Now, I'm not playing this down. This will be a big concern for households that will be worried about their bills, but what I'm saying is our politicians have heard it all before, and Chris Heaton-Harris has proved to be a politician who can change his mind.
Tracy McGee, thank you very much.
A GP who closed his County Down practice to work as a locum on the other side of the world said increasing workforce and funding pressures left him no choice but to hand his contract back after 25 years.
The Royal College of GPs is warning that doctors are unable to cope with the scale of the challenge that they face. Our health reporter Deborah McAleese has the story.
Due to shortages in our clinical team today, we are having to run an emergency-only service.
It's an appointment lottery trying to contact a GP. Frustrating for patients and stressful for doctors who are having to decide who is most in need.
We do have patients who can't access us because there aren't enough appointments available. We have practices that are under extreme pressure and, as I said, are handing back their contracts. Those are the visible signs that general practice is under pressure, but it doesn't create the headline grabbing, we've closed our doors. There is no point in dressing up the difficulties that we have and saying, look, we're managing. We're not.
Workforce shortages are forcing the closure of local practices. And job pressures mean that many GPs are now choosing to leave Northern Ireland to work in other countries.
I doubt that I'll be just working full-time as a locum in Northern Ireland again. I must say it's a lot easier working here.
Dr Colin Fitzpatrick and his wife handed back the contract for their family GP practice in Cumber in 2019. Since then, he's been working as a locum in Australia and currently at a practice in New Zealand.
It's just so different, it's not true. The GPs in New Zealand here are complaining to me how the pressure they're under. I'm seeing half of the number of patients I would see in Northern Ireland per day. The waiting lists, they complain about the waiting lists. They're weeks as opposed to months and years. We can get tests done. In Australia, when I was in Australia, if you came into me and you needed an MRI scan, I could have the result tomorrow. The systems are so different and they're so much easier to work in than it was in Northern Ireland.
Since Dr Fitzpatrick closed his practice, the situation for GPs here has become worse.
We are seeing that post-pandemic change. There is that increased demand. We don't have the capacity to match that. We are being put under pressure every day to see more and more patients and to deliver more and more healthcare. But we have to be able to do that safely, and we have to be able to meet the needs of our patients. Currently, the capacity is not there to do that.
The causes of this crisis in GP services have been well identified. But without strong political leadership to implement change, the holding pattern will just continue.
There are no routine appointments.
Deborah McAleese, UTV Live.
The 54-year-old man has been arrested in Dungiven by police investigating a vehicle hijacking which sparked a major security alert in Londonderry on Sunday evening. A delivery driver was forced at gunpoint to transport a viable device to Waterside Police Station in Londonderry.
Police have said a suspicious object which triggered a security alert on Monday night in Strabane was actually a police-issued torch which had been reported missing. Officers investigating a suspicious object found the torch inside a wheelie bin in the Inish Free Gardens area of the town. The alert forced a number of people to leave their homes.
2 people have been arrested in connection with shots which were fired at a bonfire in Derry in August. It happened on the 15th of August in the Meenan Square area of the Bogside. A 19-year-old woman and a 23-year-old man have been arrested under the Terrorism Act and are being questioned at Musgrave Police Station.
Northern Ireland's former First Minister has taken her place in the House of Lords as Baroness Foster of Adrumsey. The ex-MLA, who is now a presenter at GB News, will sit as a non-affiliated peer.
The company has pleaded guilty to 2 health and safety offences related to Belfast's Primark fire. AF Roofing, based in County Waterford, appeared before the city's Crown Court on a number of charges, including failing to ensure the health and safety of employees. 2 other companies have entered not guilty pleas to similar offences, with a trial expected next year.
The PSNI has warned they're seeing an increase in the number of people shoplifting across Northern Ireland. Operation Season's Greetings was launched this morning, which will see increased police patrols in towns and cities over the next number of weeks.
It's about safe roads, safe homes, safe socialising and safe shopping are the key themes for us. We will increase our visibility and our presence right across Northern Ireland in towns and cities and key locations that we feel there is an issue and people have concerns about. It's also about working with our partners, both in hospitality, in retail and in transport, to try and ensure safe spaces for the community in the run-up to the Christmas period.
There are 57,500 people living with sight loss in Northern Ireland, but the number of blind and partially sighted people in employment here has not increased in a generation.
Yes, 1 in 4 is in work compared to 1 in 3 15 years ago. As Barbara McCann reports, the Royal National Institute of Blind People wants to change that.
Sending an email regarding
Jamie Shields works for a global recruitment firm. He uses assistive technology to allow him to do that. Registered as blind, he knows the challenges people like him face every day.
It's because I have some sight, people kind of misconstrued that how can you be disabled if you can see, or where's your guide dog, or where's your cane? It's in workplaces that disable us because they have this misconception, or they look at us with pity or inspiration, or you're a token hire. So it's difficult because mindsets need to change.
And changing mindsets is the primary finding of new research carried out by Birmingham University.
One of the main barriers that people with vision impairments are facing is around people's perceptions of vision impairments and not understanding the adjustments which can be made. So not really appreciating that there's technology available and government funding available which can help.
The Royal National Institute of Blind People wants to change that.
I think the research has highlighted a number of key enablers to allow people with sight loss to move into employment and to increase that 1 in 4 figure.
New technology is changing the way blind and partially sighted people can do their jobs, but a more inclusive workforce will depend, as the research shows, on changing attitudes. Barbara McCann, UTV Live.
The weather's next.
And here's Aisling.
Come rain, come shine, it's warming up nicely. UTV Weather, sponsored by Grant Heating.
Hello there, and a very good evening to everybody at home. Well, this morning was a frost-free start. Lowest temperature was 4 degrees Celsius. There was a lot of cloud around. Very gusty conditions as well, gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour, but that rain did clear through. We had a little bit of sunshine then into the afternoon, a scattering of showers, but it is still quite breezy out there, but nowhere near as windy as it was earlier in the day. So still further showers on the way as we head through this evening and overnight. It remains quite blustery. Overall, it's frost-free as well. The showers perhaps a little less frequent by the early hours of the morning, and certainly Antrim and Down faring better in terms of dry weather. Temperatures though around 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, so still a chilly start to tomorrow. Now overall, some showers through tomorrow morning are slowly going to fade. So On balance, Friday looks to be the driest day of the week, so certainly turning dry into the afternoon for all of us. Some bright and sunny spells around, but it will stay quite breezy. So temperatures a touch above average for the time of year, but I think when you add on the strength of the breeze, it will feel a little bit chilly if you are out and about. And across the rest of Ireland, there's plenty of sunshine as well. Certainly some showers earlier on in the day, but most places finishing off dry and fine. Bye-bye.
Things are warming up rather nicely. UTV weather, sponsored by Grant Heating.
That's the way it is in Northern Ireland this Thursday tea time. A shorter programme than usual because of the World Cup.
Yes, the ITV News continues next. Paul Riley will be back with the late news. That's at 11 o'clock. For now, from all of us here, have a very good evening.